Great. So let me read a bit of a lengthier bio on each of our speakers here. So we have Anna. Anna is a wife and mum of 3, leads a pastors a thriving church, Revival Fires in Dudley. Her rich experience gives an innovative edge in building healthy communities and an ability to communicate with compassion to all she meets. Love that. Anna's greatest joy is to help people find freedom from developing a pioneering listening and guidance social prescribing service and working as a chaplain in the NHS. Anna has invested herself in the pursuit of seeing lives transformed and equipping others to do the same. And it's great to have you here, Anna. And also Patrick over here, because we're going to be part of the first conversation is with Anna, myself, and Patrick. Patrick is the CEO and co-founder of Kintsugi Hope, which came about following a series of personal trials and ill health affecting Patrick and his family. Prior to that, Patrick led urban youth work charity XLP, which he founded in 1996 and ran for 22 years. Patrick has travelled to over 40 countries, working with and on behalf of the poorest communities, and is a regular contributor on radio and TV on issues of justice and wellbeing. He's received the Mayor of London Peace Award and is also awarded an OBE from Her Majesty the Queen for services to young people. So Anna and Patrick, welcome.
Thank you
for being here today, and thank you for sharing with us. And Anna, I just want us to focus on church. You're a pastor, you're involved in the local community in Dudley and wider, and also with the NHS. And I wonder if you could just share with us all in the room, what's your story? What are you currently doing? And how have you gone from identifying the problem to what you're doing now?
Oh, thank you. So my story is that I'm part of a church in Dudley called Revival Fires, and each day over the last 25 years, as I've sowed myself into either volunteering or working within the church, I have personally said yes to the person in front of me who the Lord has put there. And so that has looked like volunteering, it has looked like opening up our coffee shop, it has looked like all kinds of different ministries. But you just asked, what was the problem? So I think we are all aware of what COVID did to so many places and so many people's lives individually. And as a church, long known in the community, that's when the council began knocking at our door, quite literally, can you deliver food parcels? And so we did, up to, I think it was 10 tons were delivered on front doors throughout our borough. And that also came with the offer of prayer. And some people said yes, and some people said no, but the offer was to everyone. And conversations happened there on those front door steps at safe distances through masks. And I think that was a really significant turning point in the life of our church. We began to look outwards, and that meant that we began to serve our own community in a different way. We began to see church members' lives healed, inner healing, I think what our speakers have already shared about, seeing people transformed to who they can be in Christ. And now, where are we? Well, you talked about the social prescribing part. In COVID, some medical directors who were friends with Ross and Liz, who do ACGP, Associations of Chaplaincy and General Practice, our medical directors locally came to us and said, have you got some volunteers who could sit in GP surgeries and listen and guide patients? We've all got probably somebody that we can think of who could volunteer in that space. And we sent volunteers in, it became a paid role, and it's under the umbrella of social prescribing. The NHS was looking at ways of reducing GP appointments by putting other professionals in those spaces. And so the foundation of social prescribing is what matters most to the person. As I was writing some of these things, I was in a coffee shop, and on the back of someone's t-shirt it said, go to the one in front of you. And that's pretty much what I've been doing, what our church is doing, and what listening and guidance social prescribing is. There's accredited chaplains, there's 15 of us in our borough, and that means that there's 316,000 patients who have all got the opportunity to receive listening and guidance. To me, it makes me laugh because that sounds like the Holy Spirit at work in people's lives when they can enter that hospitable space where the burdens that they're carrying can be dropped off and they can leave the session or a series of sessions feeling heard, understood, and having the opportunity to be prayed for.
Oh, I love that. You know, they say, don't they, that every cloud has got a silver lining. So when we think about the pandemic and the horror of the pandemic, the silver lining for the church, then really what you're saying is just the open doors into the community, and maybe even being more well received. Would that be fair to say?
That's absolutely, well, more than fair. That's what happened.
Yeah. We found actually that during the pandemic, when the first restrictions lifted and we could do church again with social distancing, that the local neighbours in the apartment complex reported us to the police because they saw crowds of people gathering and different things like that. And so just as we started our first Sunday service, we had the police turn up, and of course, I think it was Stuart, was sent to go and deal with the police at the front door. And the police just came to check we were observing all the guidelines. But their comment to us was this: we love that the church can meet again because we understand how important this is to people's, mental well-being. Can you give maybe an individual story from your journey so far of someone who's really been impacted by what the church has done?
Yeah, I'd love to. I have a story of a gentleman who, when I was working as a chaplain then, before I became the team lead for that service. And so it was I was working with my headset at home, it was over the phone, and I was talking to this gentleman who'd been referred to us, and it's okay to share his story. He was a stressed out teacher, and that was his own words. And he'd been referred for loss and bereavement. And we began to talk. He began to tell me of some days that were good and some days that were not so good. And then I asked the question, when were days brighter for you? Can you tell me of a good day in your past? And he said, many years ago, I used to go to church. And I said, what changed? Where are you at now? And many stories could be shared of, then they came to our church, which they sometimes do. But I want to tell you this story of this man in particular, because he said, you know what, at the end of my road, there's a church. I've always driven past it, and I've thought, I maybe want to pop in. And he came to his own terms and said, I'm going to. And on our next phone call a couple of weeks later, I asked him how it had gone. And he said, and this makes me so proud of local churches, he said, I went, the vicar and his wife invited me back to lunch, and he was so surprised, says, who does that now? And I thought, we know who does that. And he got, in his words, he got plugged in. He said, I was giving out, I was working in my school, I was doing, but I needed to find my faith again. I wrote down a quote about what he said. Let me say that. He said, we found what our family was missing. We needed COVID to help us find our missing peace.
Wow, that's powerful. We're going to come back to you in a second, Anna. Patrick, I want to come across to you. You're the CEO of Kintsugi Hope.
Yeah.
Can we just stop there, and can you explain the phrase kintsugi? Where does that come from? What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. Kintsugi is a Japanese word that means golden joinery. So if we get a bowl and we break it, we tend to mend it with super glue, and we hide the cracks, we pretend it's not broken. But what they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue. So instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. So arguably the object becomes more beautiful for being broken. It certainly becomes more unique. And I guess I'm just a firm believer, Glyn, that beauty can come out of brokenness, and that our scars aren't to be ashamed of. Jesus in his resurrected body had scars, right?
Yes.
And so there's going to be scars in heaven, and they're an important part of our story. So the whole of things about Kintsugi Hope is how can we work with communities to see that transformation happen.
I love that. And tell us a little bit then about some of the findings that you came across during your research, especially thinking about, mental health friendly church and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think what happened, like a lot of charities, is we went through this massive growth spurt during COVID, and we started Kintsugi Hope a year before COVID, which I'm so glad we did that. And so when COVID hit, we were like ready to go. And basically what we were asking churches to do was to train with us and to run Kintsugi Wellbeing groups in their community. So it's 12 weeks, loosely based on Alcoholics Anonymous, looking at issues around forgiveness and resilience. And then we wrote it in learning styles. And I think this is a really important point, because one size never fits all, right? And I think so often in the church we had this, here's a manual, just do it this way. But the reality is, all you guys are going to be from very different contexts, very different situations. So we wrote it all in learning style, so you can contextualize it to the people that you're delivering it to. And it grew to 400 churches, so 10,000 people being through Kintsugi groups, 1,500 leaders, which was totally overwhelming.
So 400 churches since 2019?
Yeah. Yeah, and what happened is I got a lot of senior leaders together in London, a lot of people that you would know, and I said, we've been through this massive growth thing, and it's really, really scary. What do you think we should do? And you know, we had psychologists and professionals, the NHS doctors, but this one guy said to me, he goes, I love it that you are creating safe and supportive spaces for those that are struggling with mental and emotional health, because a third of people that come to Kintsugi groups aren't Christians. And then he said this, what happens if the church is in a safe space? And I felt really challenged. And so we worked with Theos, the research company, academic research company, and I sort of felt like COVID sort of knocked all the stats out, you know, of mental health in the past. And so we did a massive research piece over quite a long period of time to look at what is the attitudes of mental health within the church. And there were three real big takeaways, I guess, really briefly, which Theos discovered for us. Number one, as 91% of church leaders said they had no training in mental health. Now, this wasn't a knocking church leaders thing. This was actually our church leaders have often been put in positions where they're literally doing everything. And Bible colleges are not teaching this in the way that we need them to teach. Yeah. So it was a challenge, and I hope it's okay to be challenging. I know we've all been very encouraging, but it's a challenge as well. And to look at our Bible colleges, our curriculum, and what we're preaching from the platform. The second thing the report said was that over 50% of churches didn't have a position on mental health. It was neutral. So when all the questions came out, it was like, we don't really know, it's neutral. And so what happens then is that you get churches adopt what we called in the report negative lay theologies, which is sometimes not even preached from the front. It's just what people start to believe because there's a vacuum of people talking really good theology and mental health. So I know a lot of people, for instance, that will go to a Pentecostal church, like myself, I'm at an Elam church, and they'll go, we know what they think about mental health. And actually it's never been taught, but because there's a vacuum of nothing being taught, that's what people presume, do you know what I mean? Sure. And I think that's really important. And so we looked at things like lack of faith, sin, the devil. You know, the devil was a big one. And again, it wasn't thinking of throwing the baby out in the bathwater, but if you've got a broken leg, you don't normally go, it's the devil. You might do, but you don't often do that. But as soon as you hit a mental health issue, that's where you jump quite quickly for a lot of people. So we've got to have that conversation. And then the last thing, which I thought was brilliant and got really encouraging, it said where the church is doing really well is when it's learned to be a gentle presence. I love that phrase, a gentle presence. Because the reality is, for a lot of us, we can't be mental health experts. We're going to hear from lots of mental health experts. I'm surrounded by them. But you know what? I can't be a mental health expert, but I can take my mate for coffee. And I can create a little group where we talk. And any mental health professional would say to us, loneliness escalates mental health issues, isolation. People need community. And I think that is so important for the church to recognise its role. And you know, I'm a big fan of Waverley Abbey College, and I love the way, and I think this is really important for our conversation, is that spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, mental well-being, behavioural well-being, they're not actually separate, right? It's a holistic way of engaging with the whole person, a bit like what you were saying. And I'm a bit worried sometimes we've got mental health over here, spiritual over here, and suddenly we've got different things going on. Actually, this isn't just about a tick box, let's tick the mental health box. We've got street pastors to tick the crime box, and we've got food bank to tick the poverty box. Actually, this is a holistic way of looking, and we've got to join the dots. And last thing I'd say, poverty and mental health, this is the one I feel like we really need to join. Poverty is a cause of poor mental health. It's also a symptom of poor mental health. And so talking to people like Cap and others, we've got to work out how do we join those dots to make a tangible difference and a sustainable difference in our communities.
Brilliant. Patrick, thanks so much. We're going to come back to you. Anna, let me come back to you over here. And let's just talk to pastors in the room, vicars, priests in the room, but also to church members in the room who are are thinking about how could their church potentially get engaged on this journey of mental well-being, engage in it. What would you recommend as a pastor? What would you suggest?
As a pastor, I'd suggest making your space available. So that looks like, have you got a coffee shop? Could that be a drop-in group? Have you got people in your church who are waiting to do the works of ministry? Support them. It might not be that everybody can be involved in stage ministry, you know what I mean, but they're working in their stages 40, 50, 60 hours a week sometimes. And so equipping them to do the works, how to have these, gentle presence conversations, equipping them to stand in gaps, equipping them to have one conversation at a time, one person at a time. And if they are leaders in their sphere, I know I mentioned our medical directors, if there are people in your congregation who are pivotal, well, I think everybody is, acknowledge them, pray for them, support them. We have, it's for our NHS, but it's for a health and care sector. We do prayer breakfasts every term, and it's not just people from our church, but it's borough-wide and beyond in Birmingham. People are coming to these times of prayer where we put on a great breakfast, we encourage them, we pray for them. We also are doing that for teachers as well, people who are right at the crossroads of community. So it's equipping the saints for the works of ministry. That's what I'd say to you church leaders.
It sounds easy. In the sense of it's community gatherings, that's where we start.
Yeah.
Really picking up on what Pastor Agu said. All right, Patrick, if I can come back to you with all that you've done with Kintsugi Hope. I know your stand is over there, so people can come and talk to you in a moment about this. But what changes, what practical changes do you think we need to see in church life and in our theology in order to enable us to more deeply engage in well-being?
Yeah, well, I think number one is we need to talk about it more. I still think there's so much stigma in church, Glenn, if I'm honest, and I see it at times. And sometimes I come to things like this where everyone's talking the language, and then I go and hear someone preach in their own church, and it's all about faith, and you need to have faith, and faith for this. And so there's a challenge, actually, not just to have the language, but to live it out in the sermons that are being spoken and the materials that are going forth. And I think to really have a culture of safety, safe and support. You know, I think the root issue for a lot of us who've struggled with our mental health is shame. And I think the challenge is shame and guilt are two really different things. And I think we've put them together. You know, the famous psychologist Brené Brown says, guilt is I've done something wrong. So I often say to my team, you know, if you're late every day at work, I'm really happy for you to feel guilty. And because you might be there the next day on time. But shame is, I believe I am wrong. And, you know, Brené Brown says, shame loves silence, secrecy, and judgment. Well, what's the opposite to silence, secrecy, and judgment? It's empathy, it's understanding, it's non-judgmental spaces. And I think the other thing I would say to us churches is it's the long haul, you know. Sometimes our programs we think so short term. And I remember I used to do a lot with advising the government on knife crime. And I was like, you guys need a 25-year plan, at least. To look at this. And of course, you know, they're only thinking in 4 or 5 year cycles every time. But that's where, Pastor Aggie said it, you know, that's where the church comes in. And so I think there's a huge challenge. I think there's a huge challenge for our Bible colleges to look at how we can communicate mental and emotional health better in the holistic way of doing things. But I think that, you know, people here, you know, what happens, isn't it? When people come to these conferences, normally, they're passionate, excited, involved, and, can I say this? Knackered. Tired. They're exhausted. And it's like we all talk about collaboration, but then in reality, we all do our own thing.
Yeah.
And actually, for a time such as this, surely it's time to lay down the logo, lay down the brand. I mean, like, I literally think Kintsugi Hope, we are the smallest jigsaw piece in this mental health recovery thing. We really are. We're not massive. I don't want us to be massive. I'm too tired for us to be massive. And, but you know what? Let's talk about all the other jigsaw pieces. Let's realise we're part of the bigger picture. We're not in competition. You know, I remember once when Eden came down to London, I was running XLP, and they started working on one of the estates that we were working on, and we'd been there for 20 years, you know. And someone came up to me and went, "Are you a bit naffed off that they've come on your estate and they haven't really talked to you and they're just doing stuff?" And I said, "Do you know what? On this estate, There's 7,500 people, 2,000 young people, and we work with 40 of them. Don't be so ridiculous. We really have got to go in with that heart of serving, of working together, and let's sharpen our theology together, because I think we've put up with too much.
Yeah, I love that. And Anna, tell us, how do you think prayer plays a part, whether it be, community prayer, gatherings, or just one-on-one? How important is that in the mix?
I think it's one of the most important things. I think as leaders, offering prayer covering, spiritual covering over initiatives, over vision and re-envisioning, I think that is so strategic, and that's on the heart of God, as you own the spiritual places and have spiritual authority over the place that you live and work and minister in. And then one-to-one, prayer can change lives, and sitting in a room, having a phone call with somebody, praying in those dark moments, that's where imparting the Spirit and the wisdom of God into some of those places. I'm smiling because it brings me joy. In Acts 8:8, it says, "And then there was great joy in the city." Right before that, unclean spirits were being cast out of people's lives, lameness, palsies, there was healing, which then great joy came to the city. So that's what I believe prayer can do.
Love that. And I'm going to come back to you, Patrick, for one more. Before I do that, I wonder if we could just do a quick poll in this room. How many of you still feel in the church there is stigma associated with mental well-being and mental health? Wow, okay. Patrick, it'd be good if you can just speak into that for a moment in terms of your journey with Kintsugi Hope. I really love Acts chapter 28. Paul and Silas are in a boat for 14 days in a storm, and the Bible says they were shipwrecked on the island of Malta. And there's worse places to be shipwrecked, let's face it, but they're shipwrecked on the island of Malta. But the Bible says that the islanders showed them unusual kindness. And I think in the storms of life, would it be fair to say that many people are feeling like they're getting shipwrecked on the sands of life, looking for hope? How can we, the church, really, truly show unusual kindness to society today?
Yeah, well, I think it's a theme that's been going through today. We have to create safe and supportive spaces where we don't want to rescue people, but we just want to love them. And love without an agenda as well. I think there is sometimes this little thing behind, particularly in evangelical tradition, we'll love you, but what we really want you to do is you've got to become a Christian and you've got to be part of our church. And of course, with that, I often say to people, the most loving thing you can do is tell people about the love of Jesus. My issue is just how. And I think it's stories. Let's tell the story. Jesus told stories, fishing and farming. Why? Because they're the most relevant things of our time. And Glenn, I know for me as a leader, I remember when I was leading XLP, I was doing the TV thing, I was doing the in and out Number 10 thing. Everything looked good. The show reel looked brilliant. And behind the scenes, I was absolutely falling apart. And I didn't think there was anyone I could go to. There was none accessible, because everything I heard was about victory, victory, victory. 40% of the Psalms are laments. They're David crying out, going, God, I don't get it. Yeah. And yet 40% of our worship songs aren't. And so there's a culture shift that we need to have. But I think the one thing that got me through, and I think the one thing that probably most people could testify, is someone saying, you know what, I'm not here to fix you, I'm just here to love. And that's the role of the church. We're not here to fix, we're here to love. We're here to love and to get alongside and to be non-judgmental. And to realise that actually, can I say this as well, this is really important, that people who struggle with mental health have a contribution to make.
Yes.
I don't know if you've come across the mental health continuum in mental health first aid that says actually you can have a diagnosed mental illness and be well medicated and getting all the support, and actually your mental health might be better than my mental health. It's actually really important. And I feel that people like who struggle with anxiety, that was what I was struggling with, and the game changer for me was when someone said to me, often people that struggle with anxiety are caring, sensitive, have incredible empathy. It's just that they're caring too much. It's not like a bad person, you're not a failure. You're not useless, you're just caring too much, and we just need to control that. A bit like a car alarm that's going off all the time. It's annoying for you and for everyone else, but actually it's necessary. And so I think we have to have a different conversation, and I think we have to have a big culture conversation. I always think if you define culture as the way we do things around here, then how does culture need to change within our churches so we can be more inclusive of those that are struggling with their mental health?
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Jessica and Dr. Jane, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. So for Jessica, or as Jess, as she's allowed me to call her because we had a meal together with some friends last night, Jess is a researcher, social innovator and author. She's an award-winning research consultant and social innovator committed to achieving an equitable world where all can flourish. Motivated by systems change, Jessica works to tackle some of society's biggest problems by employing a cross-sector and interdisciplinary approach. With experience as a parliamentary advisor, United Nations consultant and grassroots community organiser, Jess leverages her expertise to close the gap from top-down and bottom-up approaches to improve the socio-economic outcomes of historically underserved groups. The distinguishing feature has led her work to impact sectors across education, health policy and civil society, especially with faith groups. Her latest work in this space includes being commissioned to lead the Bishop of London's work on health inequalities and authoring the publication on faith, place and health. And Dr. Jane Fryer, Medical Director, NHS London, works one morning a week as a GP and at the Clinical Commissioning Group for NHS England London the rest of the week. She qualified from Westminster Medical School in 1980 and ran a practice in Bermondsey for 14 years. Welcome, Jess, and welcome, Dr. Jane. Great to have you with us today. And Jessica, I wonder if we can just come to you first. Can you tell us a little bit about the research that you've done and what you think it means for how churches can play an important role in tackling health inequalities?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So, yes, the research was really insightful because alongside doing this work for Bishop Sarah, who's here, I was also a community organizer. And so that meant that a lot of my one-to-ones in Hoxton, Hackney, was informing the research that I was producing. The biggest insights I found was that in the north of England, when we think about healthy life expectancy, that is the amount of years that people live in good health, a man in Blackpool is expected to live on average 53 to 54 years of good health. Whereas if you go to the east of England, you have a man that is expected to live 71 years of good health. So that's approximately 20 years shaved off of good health, and that's only taking a look at the men. If we're to look at this a little bit more intersectionally, I'm sure we'll find more there. But what struck me was that actually everyone in society, but the top 10%, is experiencing some sort of health inequality. And that's a lot of us. That is a lot of us. In our churches, we know this to be true. We actually, I say, and the research shows us that the real influencers are faith communities. Subtly, gently, but are making real influence. They are the ones that are encouraging people to either seek health, better health outcomes, or maybe not do anything about it, actually, as Patrick shared with us. But we have such a great influence on the people that we pastor and that we shepherd. Another thing from the research was how there is, coupled with what Pastor Aggie shared at the beginning, you know, we have a message, we have reach, we have prayer. What we also have, what all of those things bring together is trust. And trust is expensive these days. And it's not found in many places, but it is always found in our churches. And we have a responsibility, actually, to steward that and to be creative with it and to co-produce with one another. And there was a great willingness from the people that attended the town halls that shared with us. They were people with lived experience of health inequalities, clinicians, faith leaders, all of them had a great willingness to shape these outcomes because there was a trust, a committed and evidenced trust in churches to actually do something about this. And so I share this to say, yes, working in churches can be very tiring. It can be sometimes thankless. And I had the real honour of working in St. John's Hoxton whilst producing this research, to have up close and personal insights into what a leadership team goes through in order to meet the needs of people during the pandemic and outside the pandemic. And whilst it may seem thankless, one of the things that I have to share today from the research, but also from the one-to-ones, is something that my vicar from my London church says. He says that when we are creating church space and atmosphere, it's really important to get the trellis in place so that the vine can grow around it. A lot of what we're doing is creating the trellis. We don't need to overextend ourselves, actually. We just need to leverage strategically what foundations we have in place. For churches, we have buildings. It was estimated in 2021 that churches have contributed £55 billion social market value to tackle health inequalities. That's twice the amount of spend that local authorities have for adult social care.
That's massive.
Right?
Wow.
Right? That's us. That's just the churches alone. And in the research, we were working with multi-faith groups. So what more? We're doing good work, really good work. And I know that we're tired. I know that we're tired. But there's something about the trellis. If everybody lays their layer of the trellis down, there will be so much freedom. And that's I would say that's the insight I will share in the least non-boring report feedback I can give you today. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thanks for your insight.
You're welcome.
Dr. Jane, I'm going to come to you if you don't mind. And firstly, thank you for all you've done in the NHS over the years. We clapped you all during the pandemic, and inwardly we're continuing to clap you and thank you for all your work. I wonder if you could tell us, what is the data telling us on what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And are things improving or are they deteriorating?
Yeah, so the data I'm going to share with you is London data, so sorry it's not national, but you can translate this into the rest of the country. So just to give you some ideas, we know that mental health services were not invested in as well as they should have been. And actually there has been a huge, there's been a huge amount of money poured into mental health services, but post-pandemic, there's been a 12%, this is in London, but it would apply to every major city and rural communities as well. There's been a 12% increase in demand for talking therapies. There's been a 131% increase in people waiting for their second appointment. They've had their initial assessment.
Wow.
There's been a 30% increase in people wanting to access perinatal services. So when you've had a baby and your mental health's not very good, and a 30% increase in people asking for help with eating disorders. And those are the people that are coming forward and asking for help. So there's a whole range of people out there who are not coming forward. So that's a sort of real understanding. But hopefully that just gives you a flavour of what's happened post-pandemic around the demand for mental health services. So it's big, and we're kind of in it together. And now there's a lot of resource going in, but the health service can't solve this alone, I think, would be one of the really key things. So
it would be fair to say that the health service is under pressure?
Hugely. And our workforce is probably the biggest pressure. I mean, I'm loving your data about the resources that we have as churches. It's just extraordinary. But the workforce are tired. The workforce are tired, a bit like many of us in the room. People are leaving all parts of the health service, actually, and in mental health as well. So we're sort of struggling. And so actually we need to find a new way of working in partnership.
So how do you feel the church then can contribute in terms of the gaps that exist?
So I think they're a really, really key part. I mean, we've got some lovely examples, actually, of partnering with church and other faith communities across the capital, actually, where mental health services are working in partnership. But I think Pastor Agu touched on some of this earlier. As what we need for mental well-being, isn't it, is to have some meaning to our life. And actually, churches bring that, don't they? So we want to be connected, and what an amazing place for that. And we want safe places. Patrick's talked a lot about that. So I just think as churches, we're just, we're sort of poised really to be able to provide a lot of the stuff around mental well-being. But one of the things that I feel really passionately is the whole issue about stigma. We often pretend, I've certainly been in churches over the years, where, saying I'm not okay is not okay. So how can we address the stigma? Somebody had a conversation with me only in the last couple of weeks. We've got a new vicar who's very open about the fact that his wife had a really severe postnatal psychosis. And somebody said to me, why are they talking about it? And, actually they were modelling some brilliant behaviour about destigmatising quite severe mental health stuff. And people were going, what? Why are we talking about it? So for me, there's something about education, back to Patrick's point about stigma, stuff around, signposting, but being that sort of safe place is so important. And I think partnering together to signpost people to the right places, but also providing some of that well-being support. And that's so important. And I think we've got some brilliant... Now, the one thing that I think is really hopeful, so having been a Christian for many years and in the health service for many years, often what I have heard colleagues talking about the third sector, which they include faith groups, in a slightly patronising way. But what the pandemic has done, I think, has really taught the health service just the value of churches and faith groups and the third sector. We did amazing work together, and I think there's a huge window of opportunity now, particularly in the mental health space, but other things, building on that learning from the pandemic. So we need to seize it together, because I think there's huge opportunity.
So what would you say is one thing you are excited about regarding churches embracing this space? And the second follow-up question would be, what danger would you say just be aware of this to help bring some guidance to us? Okay,
so I think what I'm excited about is churches beginning to think about this, and that for me the destigmatisation, the education, volunteering, I think that's really exciting. I think the danger is that when people are particularly unwell, I probably would say this because I'm a GP, that we don't go beyond our competency, and that so that's one of the risks, I think. But actually making sure we've got good partnership.
Great. And can we pray for people?
That's another discussion for a wiser time. We've only got 10 minutes left. We need to pray for people. Of course we need to pray for people. I think we have to be wise about how we do it. That's what I would say.
Glenn, I think it's really helpful also to say that when people talk about mental health and mental illness, they often put the two together. And actually it's really helpful sometimes to think about the difference, because we all have mental health, everyone has mental health, and we're all on that continuum that's going round. And mental illness is very different. It needs specialist help.
Can we define the two then for everybody in the room today?
Well, you're the doctor. You're the doctor.
Okay, so how would I have not been asked that question before? I think we all have feelings of not being okay in our mental well-being, and I think we can do a lot as churches in that space. I think where people begin to tip over into what I would formally diagnose as a mental illness, that's where you need your specialists. And I think was it you were talking about, there's a sort of general practice bit, and then there's thinking about, and I think understanding and educating yourself, or being educated about what are the warning signs where actually we need to go for some extra help. And that's really important from a safety point of view and a kind of safeguarding point of view.
Wonderful. Jessica, I wonder if I can come back to you. Thank you. And what are some of the stories that you're hearing about churches and other faith groups and how they're supporting good mental health and well-being?
So at a base level, it's keeping the doors open, continuing to keep the doors open. That is the trellis that people are responding to and engaging with and finding freedom in. I guess more intricate case studies is one through the research that came out, which is called South London Listens. There is a community organising effort with Citizens UK in South London to bring together specifically it's religious institutions and local leaders, but to leverage, again, this trust element of religious institutions and churches in this case study have been instrumental in creating Be Well hubs. In these hubs, there's like 4 stages to them, or 4 expressions that they can take, rather. There could be a specialism on children and adolescent mental health. There could be a specialism on refugee and migrant communities, and so forth. They have, depending on the locality that you're in, there's training, and there's external partnerships that can be made with your local hospital and GP to actually train these local leaders, these Be Well champions, who are lay leaders in your congregation, as well as your faith leaders, to actually start responding to the issues that are being presented to them on a manageable level. I think that is it's a very fantastic case study because it's very comprehensive to the cross-sectional communities we have in our churches, from the elderly to the young, to refugees seeking safety. So that's one I would really recommend looking into. Another one that I think stands out is again in South London, it's from the Ascension Trust's Beacon project. They leveraged barbershops in South London as hubs to not only encourage men to be talking about their mental health, but to also use it as a blood pressure taking point.
That's good.
Wow.
It's, again, it's the trellis thing. You're going to get a haircut. You're going to come to church. We can piggyback off these this trellis, shall I say again. Shout out to Graham Hunter, this is his anecdotes, the trellis and the vine. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, those are 2 really great examples that I think are going on right now and that we can tap into and collaborate. I'll say one last thing, I'm sorry. It's just based on what Dr. Jane said. We are not expected to have all the answers. So partnership is really important. And in the research, it was found that when we come to the end of ourselves, that's when someone else can start their own vocation, their own specialism, and we don't need to fall apart as an institution. And so I just really want to encourage looking outwardly for the specialisms, because again, we have that factor, trust. We're the real influencers here. So let's take advantage of that.
Great, okay, and we have 5 minutes, so let's take one last question each. And the question for you is this, where do you see hope in the midst of all of this? And the follow-up question to that is this, what last thing would you like to say to the floor so that you don't go home tonight and think, I should have said that? We'll start with you, Anna.
There are solutions in this room, and there is something that you can take away from this day, from what you've heard so far. I know we're only a couple of hours in, but I believe that even in you attending, you've attended to the call that God has already put within your heart and your life and your community. And I know for us in Dudley, listening and guidance has been a wineskin or a container, if you will, to facilitate a move of God. And following on from Dr. Jane's point about working within our competences and capabilities, that is why listening and guidance, sitting within a social prescribing service within the NHS, you see it's like bigger spheres and bigger spheres, that's where we can do the works of ministry, listening to God, being attentive to the Spirit, and being attentive to the person in front of us. That's where there's hope.
Brilliant, love that, thank you.
I'm not sure I can add much to that. Yeah, our ethos is clear. We're image bearers. Yes. Even when we're tired, we also belong to a body. So we can leverage other parts of that body to keep going. And I know that the body of Christ is a distinct body, but God's common grace has fallen upon everybody. And we can leverage that shared mission to common good. So let's keep up the good work. Let's keep up the good work.
Brilliant, thank you. Doctor?
One of the things that always delights me, I think, about our faith is about how it brings light and hope in. And actually in this space of the mental health, of mental well-being and mental health, there's so much fear. And actually bringing, just start to engage with this, because actually if we begin to open up, bring light and diminish fear, it's kind of what we're about, isn't it, as a church? And actually we need it in this space more than anything.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I guess for me, hope is and optimism are very different things. I think hope is a choice that you make. And I think that as the church, we're called to be people of hope. And for me, it's like, if you go out this building, you look down and you see grey, lifeless concrete slabs looking at you. It's grey, it's tough, but wherever there's a little gap, there's grass, isn't there? Like straining to get to the surface, and you can bend down and you can pick it up, but you won't take away its root. And I guess I just want us to be people that look at our communities and go, let's see the grass growing through the cracks. Let's see the opportunities of change. And oh my goodness, we have just seen so many opportunities for the church. I think social prescribing, what an amazing opportunity. I think we need to be a bit more joined up on it. And it's sometimes very hard in some areas, but that is an amazing opportunity. The Kintsugi Hope groups, we've seen them grow so much. And the beautiful things, people are coming to faith. People are coming to. And I think Jess said, and I think there's a really good piece of advice. I think you said about piggybacking on stuff, because I think about what do we already run that we can make sure that we have this holistic vibe going through it. So for me, we run a Kintsugi group in our home group, and our home group, I've tried to get my neighbours to Alpha for years, and they're not having it. And but they came, so my home group went from 7 to 17 in one day. And at the end of my home group, Dawn, my neighbour, she won't mind me saying this, she goes, oh, what happens next week? And I was like, we're back to Bible study next week. And she goes, what's that then? And I was like, and who's it about? And I looked at the list and they were like, it's on Jonah. And I was like, oh no. And I was like, it's on Jonah. And have you ever tried to explain Jonah to a non-Christian? And there was like this fish and I explained it and she went, it's a bit confusing. I went, don't worry, just come along. And she goes, you know what, I am going to come along because I love this group. And there's something about when it's not them and us, it's just us. And you know what, I have learnt so much from Dawn, and I hope she's learnt so much from me. Single mum has done an amazing stuff. And I think that actually, if we go in with that attitude, then actually we can make a difference. We're there to serve, we're there to love, we're there to see the grass growing through the cracks.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please thank Anna and Jessica and Dr. Jane and Patrick.